There are some of you here today carrying wounds that the world cannot see, smiling on the outside but torn on the inside. You've been told you were loved, but the love you received came with conditions, came with manipulation, came with control. And you began to wonder, is this all I was made for? Before you ever took your first breath, before anyone spoke a word over your life, God had already spoken. And when He spoke, He declared that you were fearfully and wonderfully made. He formed you with intention, with tenderness, with purpose. You were created for wholeness, not for wounding. You were crafted in the image of a loving God who makes no mistakes, who breathes life into things, not to watch them be broken, but to see them flourish. There is nothing accidental about your existence, and there is nothing accidental about the desire in your heart to be loved purely, freely. Somewhere along the journey, though, life happened. Pain happened. People carrying their own brokenness spilled it onto you. They called it love, but it did not feel like love. It felt like confusion, manipulation, fear, and deep loneliness. And maybe you started to believe the lie that this is what you deserved, that this was all there would ever be for you. But the voice of God still speaks louder than the lie. He whispers into the broken places, reminding you, this is not what I created you for. I created you for wholeness. You were not made to live in a cycle of emotional starvation, constantly reaching for crumbs of affection from those who could not see your worth. You were not designed to carry the weight of someone else's insecurities, to shrink yourself down so that someone else's ego could stand taller. God never intended for your life to be defined by surviving one heartbreak after another, by patching yourself up just enough to endure another day. That is not your calling. That is not your destiny. You were created for something greater, something deeper, something lasting. Wholeness is not a distant dream or a reward for those who suffer long enough. Wholeness is your birthright as a child of the living God. It is the natural state of a soul aligned with its Creator. Wholeness means living in peace with who you are, knowing you do not have to earn love by performance, by silence, or by compromise. It means knowing deep down that you are worthy of love that does not wound, of relationships that reflect the gentleness and strength of the one who made you. The scars you carry do not disqualify you from wholeness. In fact, they are the very places where God's healing love pours in. Every place where you have been torn, every place where you have been left empty is a place God intends to fill with His presence, His truth, His restoring power. He does not discard the wounded. He binds them up. He does not shame the broken. He calls them beloved. You are not a project to be pitied. You are a masterpiece being restored by the very hands that created you. The world may have told you that brokenness is just a part of life. You were created to be a living, breathing testimony of healing, hope, and unshakable wholeness. There are moments in life when it feels like the ground beneath you has given way, when the very people you trusted reveal sides you never imagined, when the love you thought would shelter you becomes the very thing that wounds you. In those moments, exposure is a gift. It's easy to ask why. It's easy to wonder if you've been forgotten. You can see if reality somehow so that you can stop investing your love, your energy, your prayers into something or someone not to destroy you, but was never rooted in truth. He allows the mask to fall off, not to shatter your protection beyond repair, not by removing to awaken you to the truth you need, but by revealing their true character openly. He shows you the cracks, the manipulation, the deception, not to crush you, but to free you, to pull you out of a cycle that would have drained the very life from your soul had it been allowed to continue unchecked. When you are exposed to betrayal, to selfishness, to manipulation disguised as love, it cuts deeply. It stirs up anger, grief, confusion, and sometimes even shame. But buried beneath those heavy emotions is an opportunity to learn discernment, an opportunity to strengthen your spiritual sight, an opportunity to place your trust where it was always meant to be, not in flawed humans, but in the unchanging, faithful love of God. You see, exposure isn't God's way of punishing you for being too trusting. It's His way of protecting you from being forever trapped by a lie. There are lessons that can only be learned through experience. Some wisdom is too heavy to be taught by words alone. It must be forged in the fire of disappointment, in the furnace of reality. It is through being exposed to what love is not that you begin to understand more deeply what real love actually is. It is through the falsehoods that you learn to crave truth. It is through the betrayal that you learn to value loyalty. It is through the manipulation that you learn the freedom that comes from relationships rooted in honesty and respect. God is not cruel. He does not delight in your heartbreak. He does not sit back and watch your tears fall without caring. Every tear you have cried has been counted. Every groan of your spirit has been heard. And in all of it, He is working, not to leave you broken on the ground, but to raise you up stronger, wiser, and more anchored in Him than ever before. He allows you to see what you would not have otherwise seen because He loves you too much to let you live in a fantasy. He loves you too much to let you be destroyed slowly by what looks good on the outside but is rotten at the core. Exposure teaches you to listen to His voice above all others. It teaches you to walk not by sight, not by emotions, but by the leading of His Spirit. It teaches you that not everyone who smiles at you is sent by Him. It teaches you that discernment is not a gift reserved for the few. It is a necessity for all who would walk in the fullness of what God has called them to be. And it teaches you that even when the truth hurts, it is better than the most beautiful lie. What was revealed was not meant to harden you, but to heal you. What was exposed was not meant to define you by your wounds, but to free you from living beneath what God has called you to rise above. In the painful light of exposure, you are being shaped into someone who will no longer settle for counterfeit love, someone who will no longer be easily deceived, someone who will walk boldly in truth, rooted in a love that never fails. There is a kind of love in this world that wears a convincing mask. It speaks sweet words. It makes grand promises. It demands your trust. And at first, it feels like the very thing your heart has been longing for. But as time passes, the mask begins to slip. You find yourself confused more than comforted, doubting yourself more than feeling secure. You are praised one moment and punished the next. You start believing that love is supposed to hurt, that love is supposed to cost you your peace, your voice, even your very soul. But this is not love. It is a lie, carefully crafted to imitate the real thing. And its source is not from God. Toxic love seduces you with intensity, but starves you of consistency. It overwhelms you with emotions, but deprives you of security. It promises belonging while isolating you from your worth. And because it wears the language of love, because it mimics the gestures of affection, many are fooled into believing they must endure it to be worthy, to be loyal, to be loving themselves. But true love, the kind of love that flows from God's heart, does not confuse you, belittle you, or make you beg for scraps of attention. God's love is patient. God's love is kind. God's love lifts burdens. It does not pile them on your shoulders. The enemy is a master of imitation. He knows he cannot create, so he corrupts. He knows he cannot replicate the purity of God's love, so he distorts it just enough to lure the wounded, the searching, the hopeful. Toxic love feeds on your insecurities. It plays with your longing to be seen, to be chosen, to be cherished. It exploits the very tenderness that makes you beautiful and tries to twist it into something that can be controlled. It whispers lies in your ear telling you that this is as good as it gets, that you must accept mistreatment if you want to be loved at all. But the Spirit of God speaks louder if you listen, reminding you that you are already loved with an everlasting love, that nothing you could ever do would make him love you more or less, that God's true love never asks you to betray yourself. It never demands that you accept humiliation as the price of companionship. It never forces you to trade your joy for momentary approval. True love gives freedom, not fear. It builds trust, not terror. It speaks life, not death. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, not captivity. If the love you are experiencing binds you, confuses you, manipulates you, it is not the love God intended for you. It is a counterfeit meant to keep you trapped in a cycle of seeking from others what only God can truly give. When you recognize toxic love for the lie that it is, it becomes clear why it feels so exhausting, so defeating. You are trying to draw life from a poisoned well. You are reaching for something that will never satisfy because it was never designed to. Only the love of God can satisfy the deep thirst of your soul. Only the love of God can affirm your identity without conditions, without ultimatums, without threats. The God's love does not play games with your heart. He does not lure you close only to reject you. He does not bless you only to curse you. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. His love is constant when all else is shifting sand. Toxic love demands that you prove yourself again and again, but God's true love is given freely. Toxic love leaves you empty, but God's love fills you to overflowing. Toxic love fractures your spirit, but God's love makes you whole. The sooner you see the falsehood for what it is, the sooner you can begin to step into the reality of who you were always meant to be. Not desperate for love, but living from a place of already being deeply, unshakably loved. You do not have to settle for a cheap imitation of what was meant to be the greatest force in your life. You were made to walk in the truth of real love, pure love, redeeming love. The kind that only comes from the heart of God Himself. There are many who walk through life carrying pain like a permanent mark, believing it is simply their portion, their burden to bear. They have been wounded so deeply, so repeatedly, that they start to think pain is all there is and all there ever will be. But the truth of God's Word declares something different. Pain is not your portion. Healing is. Pain may have touched your life, but it does not have the final word over your destiny. You were not created to live broken, bound, or buried under the weight of your wounds. You were created to live whole, restored, and free. Pain is real, yes, and it leaves its mark. It can shape how you see yourself, how you see others, and even how you see God if you're not careful. When you've been hurt by those you trusted, when betrayal has left you gasping for air, it is easy to build your life around the wound, to let it define you, to believe that the pain is now part of who you are. But God never intended for you to live in the shadow of your hurt. He calls you out of that darkness and into His marvelous light. He calls you not by your wounds, but by your name, the name He spoke over you before you ever knew heartbreak. Healing is not a distant dream reserved for the lucky few. Healing is the heartbeat of heaven for your life. It is the song sung over you by a loving Father who has seen every tear you have cried, every night you thought you would not survive, every moment you doubted whether you were worth saving. It is the deep work of the Spirit, mending the places that human hands cannot reach, filling the gaps left by those who failed you. Healing does not erase your story, it redeems it. It does not ask you to pretend the pain never happened. It transforms it into a testimony of God's relentless, restoring love. There will be voices that tell you to settle in your sorrow, to accept that you will always walk with a limp, always carry the ache. But the voice of the Lord speaks a different word. He says, I am the Lord who heals you. He says, I will bind up the brokenhearted. He says, I will turn your mourning into dancing. He does not mock your pain. He meets you in it. He does not minimize your wounds. He pours His healing balm upon them. Healing is not passive. It is not something you stumble into by accident. It is a choice to believe that more is possible. It is a choice to reach out to the one who can do what no one else can. It is a journey, often slow, sometimes painful in itself, but it is a journey worth taking. Every step toward healing is a step toward reclaiming your true identity, the one that pain tried to steal but could never destroy. Every step says, I will not be defined by what was done to me. I will be defined by what God is doing in me. Some may tell you that the hurt is too deep, that the scars are too many, that healing is beyond reach, but they do not know the power of the one who spoke the universe into existence. They do not know the tenderness of the Savior who laid down His life to make you whole. They do not know that even now, in the middle of your brokenness, resurrection power is moving toward you, offering beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, praise for the spirit of despair. You were never meant to spend your life nursing old wounds, living half alive. You were meant to rise. You were meant to be a living testimony that healing is not only possible but promised. You were meant to walk in freedom, to love without fear, to hope without restraint, to breathe deeply without the weight of old chains pulling you back. Pain knocked on the door, but it does not get to live in the house God built for you. Healing is your inheritance. Wholeness is your destiny. Restoration is your song. The God who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it, not halfway, not partially, but fully, completely, and beautifully. There is a calling on your life that is higher than the pain you have endured, greater than the disappointments you have faced, and stronger than the cycles that tried to keep you bound. You are not called to live in a pattern of brokenness, repeating the same heartbreaks, the same betrayals, the same valleys over and over again. You were called to rise. You were called to step out of what has been familiar but destructive. You were called to break the chains that have held your family, your heart, and your dreams captive. You were not born to survive the storm just to walk back into it. You were born to rise above it, to be a living example of the power of God's redemption. The enemy would love nothing more than to convince you that your past dictates your future, that the dysfunction you witnessed growing up is all you can expect, that the love you receive filled with conditions, cruelty, or absence is the only kind of love you will ever know. But God's voice calls out louder than the echoes of your past. He says you are a new creation. He says you are set apart. He says you are chosen not to mirror the wounds of the generations before you, but to bring forth something new, something holy, something healed. It can be easier to repeat what we have seen and experienced. Pain becomes familiar. Dysfunction can start to feel like home. But you were not made for a familiar prison. You were made for freedom. The cycle you saw in your parents, in your friends, even in yourself, does not have to be the cycle that continues through you. You have been given the power to choose differently. You have been given the strength to say, it ends with me. You have been anointed not to continue the patterns that cause pain, but to break them, to shatter them with truth, with courage, with love that is pure and real. Rising is not an act of arrogance. It is an act of obedience. It is not about pretending the past didn't happen. It is about refusing to let it dictate who you become. God does not call you to rise because he thinks you are strong enough on your own. He calls you to rise because his strength is made perfect in your weakness. He calls you to rise because he has already placed within you everything you need to overcome what tried to overcome you. You are not a slave to what was. You are a vessel for what can be. Every time you choose forgiveness over bitterness, you rise. Every time you speak truth over lies, you rise. Every time you extend grace to yourself and others instead of drowning in shame, you rise. Every time you dare to dream new dreams, even after disappointment, you rise. Every time you choose to believe in love again, real love, the kind that reflects the heart of God, you rise. It is not a one-time event. It is a daily decision. It is a journey of leaving behind what has chained you and walking toward the freedom that was purchased for you at a great price. The world may try to pull you back into the same cycles. Fear will whisper that it's safer to stay where you are. Doubt will tell you that you do not have what it takes. But the spirit within you roars louder than fear, louder than doubt. The spirit within you reminds you that the same power that raised Christ from the dead is alive in you. The same power that conquered death, that defeated hell, is breathing new life into your weary places, giving you the strength to rise when everything around you says, stay down. You were not called to live a story of endless repetition, reliving the same heartbreaks, the same mistakes. You were called to walk in a new story, one marked by victory, by transformation, by grace upon grace. You are not bound to the patterns that hurt you. You are invited into a life that heals you, a life that brings healing to others through your testimony. You are called to rise, to break through, to become all that God has spoken over your life. You're called to be a light, not hidden under the weight of yesterday, but lifted high to show the world what happens when God's people refuse to repeat and choose instead to rise. There comes a point in every life where a decision must be made. A decision to either carry the bitterness of what was done to you or to lay it down and surrender it to the one who can redeem it. Breaking the cycle of pain, betrayal, and dysfunction does not begin with revenge, anger, or a hardened heart. It begins with surrender. It begins with a quiet, trembling choice to release what you cannot change and trust God to do what you cannot do in your own strength. Bitterness promises protection but delivers poison. It whispers that if you hold on tightly to your anger, you will somehow shield yourself from being hurt again. But in reality, bitterness binds you to the very pain you long to escape. Surrender is not weakness. It is the most courageous act a wounded soul can offer. It says, I refuse to let what hurt me define me. It says, I trust God more than I trust my own understanding of justice. When you surrender the offense, the betrayal, the heartbreak, you place it into hands far more capable than your own. You are not pretending it didn't matter. You are not saying it didn't hurt. You are declaring that you will not carry it any longer because it was never meant for you to carry. Surrender allows you to walk away from the prison cell that bitterness would have gladly locked you inside. Bitterness is a slow death. It hardens the heart, clouds the mind, and corrodes the soul. It turns your focus inward, causing you to rehearse your wounds instead of releasing them. Over time, it distorts your vision until you cannot see the new thing God wants to do because your eyes are fixed on the old thing you refuse to let go of. Surrender lifts your gaze. It shifts your focus from the offense to the healer. It does not erase the pain, but it transforms your relationship to it. Instead of being defined by it, you become a testimony of what God can do with a surrendered heart. The cycle continues when bitterness reigns. It passes from one relationship to another, from one generation to the next. But when you choose surrender, you choose to be the one who says no more. You choose to stand in the gap and allow God's healing to flow through you instead of allowing the hurt to perpetuate itself. It is not an easy choice. It will cost you the temporary satisfaction of holding a grudge. It will cost you the false security of victimhood. But what you gain is infinitely greater. You gain freedom. You gain peace. You gain the power to move forward without dragging the chains of yesterday with you. Surrender is an act of faith. It believes that God sees, God knows, and God will deal justly in His perfect timing. It releases the need to control outcomes and entrust them into His hands. It creates space in your heart for joy to take root again, for hope to bloom again, for love to flow freely again. Bitterness blocks the blessings of God because it fills the spaces of God, because it fills the spaces He wants to heal. Surrender clears the ground so that His grace can work deeply, restoring what was broken and making it even more beautiful than before. Choosing surrender does not mean you deny the reality of your pain. It means you choose a greater reality, the reality of God's promises, His power, and His purpose for your life. It means you refuse to let evil have the final word. It means you trust that what the enemy meant for evil, God can turn for good. It means you believe that the cycle can stop with you, that a new legacy can begin with your yes to God. The way to break the cycle is not paved with anger and resentment, but with trust and obedience. It is not bitterness that will set you free. It is surrender, humble and wholehearted, into the arms of a God who can redeem all things and make all things new.